Number 46. Find the interval of convergence for the power series n equals 1 to infinity of negative 1 to the n plus 1 times x to the n over 4 to the n. Now, what this is basically asking is what values of x are going to make this series converge to a finite number. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use the ratio test. And what the ratio test tells us is that if we take the limit as n goes to infinity of the absolute value of a sub n plus 1 over a sub n, and that value is less than 1, then we know that this will converge. Another note, if it's greater than 1, we know it's going to diverge, and if it's equal to 1, then we have to use some other test to figure that out. So, to find the limit as n approaches infinity, we first just have to evaluate whatever is inside here. So, a sub n plus 1 basically just means we're going to take this and plug in n plus 1. So, a sub n plus 1 equals negative 1 to the n plus 2 times x to the n plus 1 over 4 to the n plus 1. And then a sub n is just going to be the exact same thing. So negative 1 to the n plus 1 times x to the n over 4 to the n. So then a to the n plus 1 divided by a sub n, I'm just going to flip a sub n and then multiply by it, multiply by the reciprocal. So it'll be negative 1 to the n plus 2 times x to the n plus 1 over 4 to the n plus 1 multiplied by 4 to the n over negative 1 to the n plus 1 times x to the n. And then we can cancel some things using laws of exponents. So if we have negative 1 to the n plus 2 divided by negative 1 to the n plus 1, that's just negative 1. If we have x to the n plus 1 divided by x to the n, that's just x to the first, or just x. And if we have 4 to the n plus 1 divided by 4 to the n, that's just 4. So then take the absolute value of this. So absolute value of this equation of negative 1 to the x plus 4. I'm going to change colors. And that has to be less than 1. Or the other way you could write this is negative 1 is less than negative x plus 4, which is less than 1. So then from here, we can multiply everything by 4. So negative 4 is less than negative x is less than 4. And then divide everything by negative 1. So I'm going to have to move this a little bit. Negative 4 is less than negative x is less than 4. Divide everything by negative 1. So we're going to have 4 is greater than x is greater than negative 4. So I'm going to rewrite this with less than signs. So we're going to have negative 4 is less than x is less than 4. So we know it's going to converge on this interval. So let's see what answer choices this gives us. So we can immediately eliminate A, B, and C. And now there's just D and E. So what this tells us is that, well, on D, this is basically saying we include negative 4 and 4. And on E, it's saying we exclude that. So all we have to do is just test one of those. I'm going to test x equals 4. And we can see if that converges. So if we do that, it will be negative 1 to the n plus 1 times 4 to the n all over 4 to the n. So obviously our 4 to the n's will cancel, and we're just left with negative 1 to the n plus 1. And this is an alternating series. This is just going to alternate between negative 1 and 1. And so, according to the alternating series test, we know that this is going to diverge. And so since the series diverges at x equals 4, we know it can't be D, and that just leaves us with answer choice E. Alright, so if you have any questions from other tests, make sure to leave a comment and I'll make a video with a solution. With that said, if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe. This has been Investigative Math, and I will see you next time.